Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older. So if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So I was recently reached out to by a woman named Lisa via email. She is a family member of who today's case video revolves around. I do want to say that the host of the podcast Dakota Spotlight, which is James Woolner, did over 20 episodes on this case in a series titled Keeping the Spotlight on Barb, and that is exactly what he's trying to do. To say that he covered this case in depth would definitely be an understatement. For my video though, I'm going to be going over the main information, and if you do want to on your own deep dive a little bit more into this case, I will link all of his podcast episodes down below in the description of this video. Today we're going to be going over the disappearance of Barbara Cotton. Born on November 10th, 1965 in the tranquil town of Tioga, North Dakota, Barbara Louise Cotton, affectionately known as Barb, came into the world as a cherished addition to her parents, Louise and John Cotton. She was the seventh born out of 8 children. It was a pretty big family. Her background was Caucasian and Native American. Around the tender age of 7, Barbara experienced the dissolution of her parents' marriage. Following the divorce, her mother, Louise, made the decision to relocate to Williston, North Dakota, along with the 3 youngest children, including Barb, her older brother Kent, who was a year her senior, and their younger sister Kathy, who was 2 years younger. By this point, the 5 older children had already reached adulthood and were living independently, paving their own paths in life. Louise, a resilient single mother, worked tirelessly to make ends meet, leaving minimal funds after settling bills. Upon their arrival in Williston, the children were entrusted to a babysitter for a brief period of time. However, as time passed, they were compelled to assume responsibility for their own well-being and each other's while their mother was at work, and this continued for quite a few years. This disappearance happened over 40 years ago. As time goes by, details become fuzzy. This is not a cut and dry case. There is a lot to it. It's confusing. And it's one of those cases where there's things that some people remember that go against things that other people remember. Who's telling the truth? We don't really know, but I will try to simplify it to the best of my ability and primarily go over what we do know and some things to consider. Now, based on the original police report filled out by Louise the day after the disappearance, on the evening of April 11th, 1981, Barb, who was 15 years old at the time, vanished without a trace following a dinner with her boyfriend and a mutual friend in downtown Williston. Despite her boyfriend's offer to accompany her home, Barb politely declined. Standing on the corner next to the Plainsman Hotel, her boyfriend, supposedly, observed her as she ventured into Recreation Park. Based on the court document from 1998 to declare Barbara officially deceased, this was at around midnight going into the 12th. In 1985, an article ran in the Bismarck Tribune states that Louise said that she returned home from work around 11 p.m. that night and that she actually talked to Barb. That Barb said she was going to be home in a little while and that she was going to go work in the morning at Country Kitchen, which is a diner that she worked at the time. This would have occurred before what her boyfriend would later say happened when he last saw her. Based on the police report, it was a dinner. But it is also believed that Barb went to a party that night as well, which we will get into more very soon. In the write-up done on this case, Lisa says, precise, clear, complete, verifiable. These aren't words you're likely to hear used to describe the timeline leading up to Barb's disappearance. And I couldn't agree more. What actually happened that night before she vanished, we don't know. As I'm sure that most of you are wondering right now, well, who's the boyfriend? Well, as Lisa states in the case summary on the website, the title of boyfriend is a loose one because none of Barb's close friends ever remember her having a boyfriend during this time. The only person in Barbara's life who really recalls her having a connection with this person is her mother. But Who is he though? The main thing that Louise really knew about him at the time of Barb's disappearance was that he used to work at Cakes and Cones, washing dishes, but there's of course more. His name was Stacy. On October 5th of 1959, in the serene town of Wairika, California, Stacy DeMar Werder was born. Classmates of his remember him as being overall a nice guy. Echoing the sentiments of his classmates, Stacy's sisters also acknowledge his exceptional intellect and sometimes kind nature. Yet, amidst these positive traits, haunting memories of sudden and extreme violence will emerge for them. There were instances where Stacy's temper would flare up uncontrollably, leading to alarming outbursts of aggression. His family bore the brunt of these terrifying episodes, harboring no doubts that Stacy's intentions were nothing short of lethal towards his targets at the time. It is apparent that he struggled mentally. He had actually been in the Navy in 1980 and was discharged due to him being properly diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Delusions and hallucinations can become common with this, and people who suffer from it can be triggered easily. It is a very serious mental condition and it can be debilitating. We also have to take into consideration that this was the early 80s and our understanding of any mental health issues was far less than it is now. There are a lot of things about Stacy, just like any person, but one thing we do know about him is that he was a drifter. He traveled a lot. He didn't drive, so he hitchhiked everywhere he went, and he had been many places all over North America. We do know that he was in Williston at the time of Barbara's disappearance and left very soon after and headed to, supposedly immediately after, Montana. Barb, though, we know that she vanished on April 11th, going into April 12th, and that the next day her mother filed the police report, the missing persons report, and on the 13th we know that Louise phoned the Williston Police Department to tell them that she thinks her daughter may be in Scobie, Montana at the Pioneer Hotel in room 205. Authorities in Williston contacted authorities in Scobie and informed them of this new information given to them. The hotel was searched and neither Stacy or Barb were there. When it comes to how Louise obtained this information, that is uncertain. Now though, let's go a little bit more into the party. This party was on the night of April 11th, 1981, supposedly, and was at the 18th Street Apartments in Williston. The party was held by two sisters, and they have stated that it has been so long since that night, but they strongly believe that the night of their party was the very night that Barb vanished. One sister distinctly remembers Barb departing the gathering with who she believes to be Stacy after she saw a photo of him years later. She said that sometime later she witnessed him return to the party, this time unaccompanied by Barb. Curiosity piqued, she inquired about Barb's whereabouts, to which the boyfriend, supposedly Stacy, cryptically responded that she had caught a ride, offering no further details, which of course, suspicious. The other sister, on the other hand, recalls being informed that Barb's boyfriend, supposedly Stacy, had appeared at their apartment the following day, consumed by a sense of urgency. He demanded answers regarding Barb's whereabouts, his distress evident in his demeanor, which is very odd because one sister said that she remembered him returning to the party without Barb. So if he was the last person who saw her and saw her walking away into the night, why did he return to the apartment the next day and ask where she was? Was it to cover something up? Again, we don't know. Lisa and James, who did the podcast episodes, have talked to many people directly involved in this case or who knew Barb well. One of those people was Barb's friend, Sandy. Barb and Sandy had been extremely close for quite a while, but they drifted apart. They just weren't as close as they had been, and that was something that Louise knew. She knew this, but on the night of Barb's disappearance, she actually called Sandy to see if Sandy had seen Barb that night. Sandy had not. She had been roller skating. She did recall having A strange feeling though that night that she just couldn't explain. Call it some sort of like instinct or a gut feeling that something was wrong. Sandy's mother and Louise were also friends and still talked regularly despite their daughters not really doing the same anymore. Sandy's mother did recall speaking to Louise regarding Barb's disappearance a little bit later, and allegedly Louise told her that during the night of the disappearance, she had attended the dinner with Barb and Stacy. That apparently this dinner, it went well and she was happy about that. Like I stated before though, based on the police report, it was Barb, Stacy, and another friend. But according to Sandy's mother, Louise stated that she was also in attendance. So this is kind of what I mean when I said at the very beginning, some things that some people say go against things that other people say. Could it just be faulty memory? We know that Barb and Sandy's friendship was not what it used to be. So who was Barb's best friend though when she went missing? Because, you know, most people have a best friend and it's the person who knows them the best. That would be Diane though, who was also talked to in recent years by the ones keeping this case alive. Barb and Diane, they shared an exceptionally close bond. They were inseparable, spending the majority of their free time together, as is customary for teenage best friends. Barb's presence was a constant at Diane's house. In fact, she was pretty much there more than she was at her own house. However, this aspiration was met with resistance from Louise, leading to another source of conflict between Louise and her daughter. It is said that they didn't always see eye to eye on a lot of things, which I can't say that that's too suspicious or anything because it's not uncommon for a teenage girl and her mother to sometimes butt heads. Both Barb and Diane worked at local diners, diligently saving their hard-earned money with a common goal in mind, which was to secure their own apartment once they turned 16. Diane found employment at the Thunderbird Cafe, while Barbara, like I stated before, worked her shifts at Country Kitchen. This was truly one of the main things the two were looking forward to in life. That and Diane's wedding. Diane was young, but she was planning a wedding that was set for July of 1981, with Barb being the maid of honor. Louise, still to this day, has the dress that Barb was set to wear for the ceremony. Diane has stated that in the week prior to Barb's disappearance, she hadn't seen her as much, which was very odd. Could it have been because of Stacy, the supposed boyfriend? Maybe Barb was spending a lot of time with him. That could be, but this boyfriend information was actually shocking to Diane, considering she figured that she would have been the first person in Barb's life to learn of a new love interest. Diane stated though that even though they didn't talk much in that week, she had spoken to her on the phone on the 10th of April, which was the day before she would have went missing, and that she remembers Barb saying that she was at a friend's home, a female friend that Diane doesn't recall the name of, and that they were going to be taking a dog to the vet the next morning. That was the last time she ever spoke to her. When it comes to Diane's opinions about her best friend's disappearance, Diane has never believed for even a second that Barb would have just up and left. She does not believe that she was a runaway. Barbara had so many things to look forward to in life. She was overall a happy teenager. She had her usual, you know, teenage problems that we all have, but she had a lot of things that she was excited about. Why would she just head out? If she was having any trouble, she knew that she could have always stayed with Diane. I also have to mention that Barb didn't take anything with her that she would have if she was going to leave. She left behind a recent paycheck, all her other personal belongings, including her eyeglasses, which she wore on the regular, and even a pack of cigarettes. Yes, a person can hide what they're feeling inside and their intentions and things that they're planning, but she didn't seem to express to anyone in her life a desire to leave that life behind. And why? For a boy that Diane never even heard of until after Barb's disappearance. I'm sure though that you all might be curious if out of everyone involved in this case, everyone who knew Barb, was Stacy ever really questioned? No. And he never will be. During April and May of 1981, there isn't much known about where Stacy was, but it's believed that he was in Montana at that time because we know that he was supposed to be heading from North Dakota to Montana, and we know that he was in Montana in June. We know that he was there in June because he was arrested on the 12th of that month in Glasgow. He would go on to face a similar charge of disorderly conduct on July 15th of 1981 in Malta after an incident at the Villa Theater. Keep in mind that this was only a few months after Barb went missing. That night, in his jail cell, he would end up hanging himself in a successful suicide attempt. He took his last breath at around 1:30 in the morning at the age of 21. Stacy had actually called to his family back in California that night, and his sister Laura answered. He told her to tell their mother that he loved her, and only a few hours later, he took his life. Which now we have somebody where the timelines match up. It's the last person who saw her. He had anger issues, and he ended up taking his life. Could it have been guilt? Again, we don't know. This is a sketch done of Stacy by artist Annie Ramsey. It was created based off of his photo from the Navy and a photo of him with longer hair. This is close to what he would have looked like during Barb's disappearance in 1981. Stacy's sisters have said that they do remember their mother and Louise speaking on the phone at times. Barb was missing and Stacy was deceased. They possibly found comfort in each other's situations. Their mother referred to Barb as Stacy's girlfriend. That is something to keep in mind. Whether this is because Louise stated that they were a couple, or maybe possibly because Stacy said himself that Barb was his girlfriend, this is unknown though. His sisters though have said that due to his known anger, as soon as they heard of what happened with Barb, that she was missing, they immediately suspected that their brother had some involvement. Based on one report, Louise stated that she spoke to Stacy's mother and that Stacy's mother had actually told her that Stacy spoke of Barb very soon before he committed suicide. So it's obvious that Barb had been on his mind around that time. Now, after Stacy committed suicide though, a friend of his nicknamed Red brought Stacy's mother a lot of Stacy's belongings. This friend said that he had met Stacy outside of Malta when he picked him up hitchhiking, and that he himself never really noticed anything suspicious about him, that Stacy wasn't acting odd, and that Stacy never mentioned Barb during this short friendship. This case, it definitely has its twists and turns, and although no one has ever been arrested in connection to Barb's disappearance, it has its list of suspicious characters, and that's basically three main ones. If you listen to the Dakota Spotlight podcast, you will come to realize that there are quite a few people that should have been questioned by authorities in relation to this case and simply never were. Stacy's own sisters were never even questioned about their brother. This case definitely will take you down that rabbit hole and have you wondering for days afterwards exactly what happened, and who knows more than they've probably led others to believe. Towns talk, but towns also keep secrets. Could someone still in the area of Williston know what happened to Barbara on April 11th of 1981? That is a possibility. There are people that are not suspects in this case because there's no real suspects, but are persons of interest. Stacy, of course, being one of those. Even though he is deceased, he is still someone looked at under suspicion in this story. He is also not the only person to have committed suicide not long after her disappearance. The other person is Frank J. De La Pena. In April of 1981, Frank J. De La Pena resided and worked in Williston. It seems that not long after Barb vanished, he faced, as one would call it, a mental breakdown, and he would lose his job as a seismologist, and he would be hospitalized for mental health concerns. Usually for something like this, there is a 72-hour hold at least, but he only spent a night being observed by a psychiatrist from May 1st to the 2nd. A few days later, he skipped town and started heading to Rawlins, Wyoming. On his way there, he tried multiple times to abduct women and children, both boys and girls, by saying he had a husky puppy he was trying to find that was loose in his trailer that had been connected to his van. His sinister plan unfolded in early May with unfortunate success outside Rawlins. During the evening hours, he abducted two innocent young girls, aged 9 and aged 12, a mere stone's throw away from the protective walls of the local police station. The following morning brought a grim discovery as their lifeless bodies were uncovered near an interstate exit, a staggering 54 miles east of Rawlins. Given his numerous attempts across various towns, it came as no surprise that the killer's true identity was swiftly unraveled. He was apprehended in Colorado after he tried to get another job with the company that he worked for back in Williston, which was Savant Geophysical. I'm glad he made the slip up because he was eventually caught because of it, but I can't believe that he tried to get a job with the same company he worked for back in another state when he just committed a horrible, disgusting crime, and it was found out what happened and they were going to be looking for the person who committed it. Well, the weight of these heinous crimes seemed to prove too heavy for him to bear as he took his own life while in custody. Consequently, he remains a person of immense interest in the case of Barbara Cotton's disappearance. The last person I have to mention is someone that is definitely the most sensitive to bring up when it comes to people of interest. He was listed by authorities as a person of interest in Barb's case before the current investigators took over it, so we can't be certain whether current investigators would have considered him someone to even look at. Were they possibly just reaching for anything because there was so little to go off of? Or is there something lying in those private police files that makes this individual look suspicious? That last person is Barb's own brother, Frank L. Cotton. Frank actually lived in Williston at the time of Barb's disappearance. He was 32 at the time, being the second born out of the 8 children. Now, just like the other 2 people of interest, Frank is no longer alive either, but not because of suicide. Frank passed away in 1999 from colon cancer, so of course he is not currently here to even attempt to clear his name or defend himself. There was a woman who had a tragic experience with him, according to her, and shared her story on the podcast during episode 17. If you want to hear that, again, it will be listed below in the description. I dislike mentioning someone as a person of interest when I can't give much as to why they are or how they became one in a particular case, but based on the case itself, I don't feel like I would be covering the case properly without at least mentioning him. Still, after 42 years, so little has been produced in this case. There are far more questions than answers, which, when you think about it, are there really any answers at all? The cold hard fact is that this teenager's remains are somewhere. Someone knows what happened, and that person is either not alive to eventually cave and tell that information or has been silent all of this time. People still care though. Just recently, the funding for a billboard to help spread the word even more was put up in Williston, and a memorial was held. The memory of her lives on. If alive today, Barbara Louise Cotton would be 57 years old. She was last seen wearing a light tan summer jacket, Wrangler brand blue jeans, a blue pullover blouse, and rust-colored suede loafers. She stood at 5 feet 2 inches tall and roughly 100 pounds. Her eyes were hazel brown and her hair was brunette. Some physical characteristics of hers were that she had a mole on the upper right side of her chest and a mole on the right side of her neck. Her ears were pierced, but if she was wearing any jewelry in them or any jewelry at all at the time of her disappearance, this is unknown. Her left ear was lower than her right one. She also had a curvature of her spine, possibly moderate scoliosis, as it has been described as a pronounced S curve that resulted in a slight sway or limp when she walked. When it comes to dental, she had fillings in multiple molars. If you have any information regarding her case, you are urged to contact 911 or 1-800-THE-LOST, which is 1-800-843-5678, or the Williston Police Department of North Dakota's Missing Persons Unit at 1-701-577-1212. So that is all of the information that I have for you today regarding the disappearance case of Barbara Louise Cotton, and it is one that I have to say has been heavy on my heart as of recently. I want to thank Lisa so much for talking with me and writing the original email so I could dive into this case myself and do this video on her case and hopefully spread the word just a little bit more. If you have any thoughts or opinions about this case, make sure to leave those down below in the comments, and of course, like always, leave some kind words down below in the comments as well for the loved ones of who today's video revolves around. If you have any cases that you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send those over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com, and I will see you all in the next one.